Mr. President, Mr. Provost, Madam Secretary, masters, deans, colleagues, friends, families, and most of all, women and men of the class of 2012. Welcome. Welcome to this day, this beautiful day, and congratulations. I now call on the Senior Associate Chaplain, the Reverend Ian Oliver.
Will those who wish, please join me in prayer. On this day of endings and beginnings, we give thanks to you, the source of life, for all that has been and all that is yet to come. We rejoice in the learning and wisdom attained in this place, the bonds of friendship, the love and support of families, the wealth of memories, and the fruits of endeavor, and especially the promise and challenge that lie ahead. Bless all who gather here this day, and bless these graduates to be a blessing to the world. May your light illumine and your truth guide their way, now and always. Amen.
A selection from Psalm 43. Send forth your light and your truth. They will lead me. They will bring me to your holy mountain, to your dwelling place, that I may come to the altar of God, God, my delight, my joy, that I may praise you with the lyre, O God, my God.
Matthew chapter 5, verses 14 through 16. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven.
Assalamu alaikum. God is the light of the heavens and earth. The likeness of his light is that of a niche in which there is a lamp. The lamp is in a glass. The glass is, as it were, a brilliant star, lit from a blessed tree, an olive neither of the east nor of the west, whose oil seems to glow, even though no fire has touched it. Light upon light. God guides whom he wills to his light. God makes parables for humanity, and God has knowledge of everything.
Well, this seems awfully quick. Weren't we just meeting here a few short months, years ago for your freshman assembly? How did that happen? On this occasion, Baccalaureate, it's customary for the president to deliver a baccalaureate address and for the dean of Yale College to offer a few readings. So make yourselves comfortable for some words I've chosen to share with you. In your daily travels at Yale, you have walked through this building where we are today, Woolsey Hall, on a regular basis. Some of you have walked through the rotunda dozens of times a week. You think of this space as commons or as the grand concert hall that surrounds us. But what is this building? It is a war memorial, and this is once again this commencement weekend, just a week before Memorial Day weekend, when we think of and we honor those who have died in their nation's service, from Lexington, Massachusetts to Afghanistan. But the commemoration and the formation of a holiday that would take place in May took shape after the Civil War, when more Americans died than in all the other wars in which US soldiers have fought. The names of Yale soldiers, Union and Confederate, North and South, are inscribed just outside this hall. 150 years ago, in 1862, this nation was in the midst of this terrible war. Friends and classmates had taken up arms against one another. By the end of the war, and after 700,000, yes, nearly 750,000 had died, President Lincoln closed his second inaugural in this way. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. A just and lasting peace. Yale students, by and large, young men from New England in 1865, would have read those words in a local newspaper, perhaps reading the text aloud to one another. Those students knew the rent in the national fabric, the broken bones of the United States that had not yet begun to knit together. We continue to strive for healing now, nearly 150 years later, in both national and international respects. Lincoln calls for this in his formal speech to his countrymen to remember to care for him, his widow, his orphan. As part of its continuing series about the sesquicentennial of the Civil War, the New York Times ran a story about the short life of a foot soldier killed at Gettysburg in 1863, and whose orphaned children became symbols of the war's sacrifice. The Times has given the fallen soldier a new life in a story of hard-scrabble farming, whaling, and battle, compellingly revealed in his letters to his wife, where one learns that they were one another's best friends. In the short lines of his last letter home, he found a way to express the depth of his love for his friend. If I ever live to get home, you will not complain of being lonesome again or of sleeping cold, for I will lay as close to you as the bark to a tree. Amos Humiston, days before the Battle of Gettysburg. You arrived here as strangers. Remember those few short years ago when Provost Salovey, then Dean Salovey, welcomed you here, as did President Levin. As you make your plans to leave, you leave as friends. Many of you have been my own friends. It's been my great joy to know so many of you. And in my days as a college master, you, class of 2012, were my last class. here's what happens to you, Yale undergraduates, along the path of the 4 years. You change. You acquire new knowledge, much of it useful, some of it quirky. You learn how to ask better questions. A generation or two learned to do this through a children's encyclopedia known as the Book of Knowledge, perhaps the edition of 1936, from which this prose poem by a Yale faculty member is conceived, whose black and cracked spines sat on a shelf in my family home, the reading for long winters. Stay with me for 17 questions as I take you to From the Book of Knowledge by Cynthia Zarin, 2010. 1. What makes a fairy ring? Fairy rings are made of a kind of fungus. 2. Why does damp air make us ill? Damp air is often cold air, and the cold has usually been blamed for making us ill, although many facts prove that it is not blameworthy at all. 3. Why does a dog go round and round before it lies down? The answer to this question lies in another question. What is a dog? 4. Can our brains ever fill up? The poet Browning says there is no end to learning. 5. Why does a tuning fork sound louder when it touches wood? The sound from a tuning fork, like the light from a candle, flows out in all directions. 6. Why are some things poisonous? We could only answer this question completely and fully if we knew all there is to know about life. 7. Why can we hear better when we shut our eyes? This question is partly true and partly not true. 8. Can an animal think? There is no doubt an animal can think and that it can remember. 9. Do animals feel pain as we do? That is not a question that can be answered directly. 10. Why do we not growl like animals when we are hungry? A hungry man is an angry man. 11. Why have leaves different shapes? The great idea, which we learn to apply to every fact about living creatures, is that these facts usually have uses. 12. Why do the leaves of the aspen always shake? The shaking of the leaves has the same effect as if the trees were fanning themselves. 13. Why does oil make a wheel go round more easily? It all depends on where the oil is put. 14. Why do we see the stars only at night? The stars are shining all the time, sending light to Earth, but more than this is needed for us to see. 15. Is an atom alive? It is almost a living thing. 16. Can country people see writ small better than townspeople? If country folk use their eyes mainly at distances, their vision will be keenest at distances. 17. Why does a lump rise in my throat when I cry? It is the place of speech, which is the most marvelous thing. Finally, it is a Yale College tradition to read a passage by John Milton on this occasion. I think you know this story. There were these two young 20-somethings, well, maybe they were even just teenagers, and they were in a garden. It was a perfect place, and they knew that. And they also couldn't stop themselves in wanting to know about the world beyond. They couldn't help but want to know about it. I think, as in that Zarin poem, there was a thirst for knowledge. And then there was a wardrobe malfunction. Remember that part? Like you, and as you may particularly feel on Monday afternoon or Tuesday morning, their departure seemed to them sudden, unwarranted, abrupt, but inevitable. From Paradise Lost by John Milton, 1667. Some natural tears they dropped, but wiped them soon. The world was all before them, where to choose their place of rest, and Providence their guide. They, hand in hand, with wandering steps and slow, through Eden took their solitary way. Congratulations, class of 2012.
Good afternoon. Before I begin my remarks, I want to welcome especially the parents of our graduates. I know how very special this weekend is for you. My wife and I have shared this experience 4 times at the commencement of each of our children, and I know that you are bursting with pride. So let's celebrate together, and let me ask the proud families and friends of our graduates to join those of us on stage by rising and offering warm congratulations to the class of 2012. And now I would like to ask the class of 2012, in turn, to reflect for one moment on how you came to reach this milestone. Now that you've done that, one of the things that must have occurred to you during that moment of reflection is that there are many people here today, your parents, siblings, relatives, and friends, whose support and encouragement made your achievements here possible. So why don't you rise now and show them your appreciation? Members of the class of 2012, I imagine you're finding it difficult to believe that your time here has come to an end. Let me tell you from experience, your memories of Yale College and the lessons you have learned here will endure. But you have so many exciting possibilities ahead of you that the sense of loss you feel today will fade quickly. And think of all that you've accomplished. You have opened for yourselves worlds that you never knew existed when you came here 4 years ago. You have discovered that you love philosophy or music or art history or archaeological field work or analyzing economic data or computer images of the stars or characterizing endophytes that you gathered on a trip to a rainforest, or helping to build a quantum computer. Nearly 900 of you spent at least one summer or semester in South America or Africa or Asia or Europe, learning a language, doing research, working as an intern, or taking a course led by a Yale professor. You have learned the value of seeing the world and the value of appreciating differences among people. You have worked hard. You have had fun. You've made friends for a lifetime. And you've come to know yourselves better than before, not only from the books that you've read and the courses you've taken, not only from the overseas experiences that you've had, but also from your endless discussions with classmates about your beliefs, hopes, and aspirations. You've also learned something here about responsibility. You've lived in communities, communities formed by your suite mates, your entryway, your college, as well as in communities defined as singing groups, chamber orchestras, dramatic societies, service organizations, publications, religious organizations, athletic teams, fraternities, sororities, or societies. Living in these communities and making them work has been a big part of your experience. You have learned that as gifted and as talented as you are, and you are, it is not all about you. It's all about us. You have learned that making communities productive and a positive experience for all means taking account of the perceptions, feelings, and aspirations of others. Living in some of Yale's many communities has made you a better listener, more respectful of others, and better equipped to serve and lead in the world beyond these walls. And what of that world that you are entering? There are big communities out there in which you will have roles and therefore responsibilities. We are a global university, and each of you has a nation to which you now have an opportunity to contribute. Problems abound all around the world, and the choices of direction are confronting every nation. Europe is debating austerity versus growth. In the aftermath of Arab Spring, Middle Eastern and North African countries are testing whether democracy can thrive. China is struggling to find a way to distribute the fruits of increased prosperity more equitably and to diminish the adverse environmental impact of rapid growth. The argument I want to advance now applies equally to those of you with responsibilities as citizens of countries around the world, but I will focus for the moment on the United States, where all of you have chosen to attend school. Surely you've noticed that there is a presidential election going on, but it does not seem to have captured the imagination of many of you as elections have often in the past. I think I know why. I think it's because the issues that truly matter for the nation and the world are not at center stage. And there are, for sure, issues that truly matter. How do we create a sustainable foundation for long-run prosperity with good jobs created in ever-increasing numbers to spread the fruits of growth more equitably across the population? How do we provide high-quality and humane health care at a cost we can afford? How do we prevent the continued consumption of fossil fuels from warming our planet to the point that ecosystems are destroyed, food supplies are threatened, and rising sea levels force hundreds of millions to relocate? And as a nation, how do we engage with a world in which the distribution of power and influence is inevitably becoming more multipolar? It's not that these issues are being altogether ignored. For example, competing approaches to revitalizing the economy are very much the subject of debate, but the issues are typically broken into unconnected pieces and discussed in terms that reflect oversimplified ideological preferences rather than serious analysis. We talk about whether to increase the debt ceiling as if this were a religious issue, or whether to extend the tax cuts enacted a decade ago, as if this in itself were the single question defining the proper role of government in the economy. Meanwhile, we ignore serious deliberation of how to undertake and finance on a substantial scale the investments in infrastructure, innovation, and education that are of fundamental importance to our future well-being. The issue of climate change seems to have disappeared under the table, buried in an avalanche of know-nothing advocacy that disparages decades of disinterested scientific research. And the implications of a shift in the distribution of power among nations are simply not in the debate chamber. Instead, we talk about securing a new American century as if continued global dominance were a national objective. I do believe that America can prosper and lead in the 21st century, but the global landscape today is far different than it was in 1945 when the World War II ended, or 1989 when the Cold War ended. We should be talking now about how we might work effectively with other nations in the context of more widely shared power and responsibility. I was poignantly reminded of the poverty of our current political discourse when, a couple of weeks ago, Professor Stephen Smith, who recently stepped down as master of Brantford College, you can cheer, he's up in the balcony, gave me a copy of his new edition of the Writings of Abraham Lincoln, just published by the Yale University Press. How utterly refreshing it is to read Lincoln's beautifully written, closely argued speeches and letters that grapple directly, deeply, and forcefully with the issues of his time. Of course, Lincoln's main preoccupation was with the subject of slavery, and he addresses that issue with a rigor and depth of argument that is simply unknown in American political discourse today. But he also touched brilliantly on other subjects of more direct relevance to our current situation. In a speech given in Milwaukee to the Wisconsin State Agricultural Association in September of 1859, Lincoln addressed the full range of issues associated with deriving maximal social benefit from the development of what was then the nation's most significant natural resource, its fertile and abundant agricultural land. Like so many of Lincoln's speeches, this one is remarkable for displaying an extraordinary mastery of his subject matter. His discussion focused on the need for continued innovation as a means to greater productivity and prosperity. To enable such innovation, he stressed the importance of infrastructure in the form of access to adequate supplies of water, and he especially emphasized the need for education. Farmers, said Lincoln, need not only to be literate, but also to have a working knowledge of botany, chemistry, and the mechanical arts. One might have thought that Lincoln's vision of increasing prosperity through investments in innovation, infrastructure, and education might have been set aside in the face of the overwhelming priority of civil war that confronted him 6 weeks after taking office. But no, within a period of 2 years, working with Congress, Lincoln was able to enact legislation authorizing a transcontinental railroad, the Homestead Act, enabling the establishment of farms across the Western territories, and the Morrill Act, granting land for the establishment of colleges to teach agriculture and the mechanical arts, colleges that subsequently became our treasured state universities. These public investments were the foundation of late 19th century America's prosperity. We need to make such investments again today. We need to repair our crumbling infrastructure, our highways, ports, railroads, and airports, as well as waste and water management, traffic control, and communication systems. To make possible the flow of innovations upon which our economy depends, we need to maintain our commitment to investing in science and to equip our citizens with the skills required to be productive and competitive in a modern, technology-enabled workplace. We need to make large and well-directed investments in both basic K-12 education and in specialized technical training. The gap in earnings between the highly educated and the poorly educated has grown dramatically in the last 3 decades, and the earnings of those without a college education have not even kept up with inflation. Educating our workforce is the most effective way to prevent rising income disparity. On Monday morning, I will confer upon you the degrees in Yale College recommended by your dean. And I will at that moment admit you to all their rights and responsibilities. Not rights and privileges, which is the language used at most of our peer institutions. You already have had the privilege of the finest education on the planet. Now, you will assume the responsibilities that are entailed by your privilege. By using the powers of reason and expression that you have developed here, by drawing upon your wide exposure to many disciplines and forms of discourse, each one of you has the capacity to make a difference in the quest for a better world, for yourselves and for future generations. You can start by engaging in the public debate about the investments needed to secure our future and the perspective needed to operate effectively in a multipolar world. You can bring rigor and seriousness to the political dialogue and insist that others do so as well by rejecting superficial ideological slogans that are no substitute for true argument. And you can engage more directly in repairing the world through the career paths you choose and the organizations you join and support. I'm not saying that you all need to take up public service or teach school, although I hope and I trust that some of you will. Instead, I'm urging you to engage with the future by helping to raise the sights of your communities, as Yale graduates traditionally have, and not to confine your activity merely to the private pursuit of health, wealth, and happiness. This is where I started, by reminding you that Yale is not merely a place that enabled you to define and transform yourselves as individuals. It has been for each of you a network of many communities in which you were expected to participate and in which you were expected to contribute. The world outside is no different. We need you to engage, to consider the well-being of others as well as yourselves. We need you to take responsibility. Lincoln closed his Wisconsin speech with a memorable passage, inspiring his audience with his inimitable and graceful prose, not to accept the world passively, but to work actively toward its betterment. He said, and I quote, "Let us hope that by the best cultivation of the physical world beneath and around us, and the intellectual and moral world within us, we shall secure an individual, social, and political prosperity and happiness whose course shall be onward and upward, and which, while the earth endures, shall not pass away." Women and men of the class of 2012. Congratulations. Your accomplishments, inside and outside the classroom, have earned our heartfelt praise and admiration. You've expanded your own horizons and you've sustained and improved the life of Yale's many communities. Now is the time to build flourishing lives for yourselves and also to strive for the betterment of your communities, local, professional, national, and global. Help these communities cultivate the world around us and the worlds within us. Take inspiration from Lincoln and from your own experience here at Yale, and make your course and the course of those without the privileges accorded to you, onward and upward. Congratulations.
May God bless and keep you. May the Eternal One show you favor and be gracious to you. May the Holy One cause light to shine upon you and grant you peace. Amen.